Welcome to Breaking Down Patriarchy. I'm Amy McPhie Allebest. Think back to your earliest memories of school. Who was in your class? What was the environment like? Okay, keep that in your mind. And now come on a little historical journey with me where we drop in on a few schools throughout the ages. In Mesopotamia, only a limited number of individuals were hired as scribes to learn reading and writing. So only royal offspring and sons of rich professionals went to school. Most boys were taught their father's trade or were apprenticed to learn a trade, while girls stayed at home with their mothers to learn housekeeping and cooking and to look after younger children. In the cities, see, there we go. In the city-states of ancient Greece during the 5th and 4th century BCE, affluent students were taught by private tutors, while the state educated young men in military training. During the Islamic Golden Age, Muslims established schools next to mosques where boys were educated. Girls also had opportunities for education, not just learning cooking and caretaking. And a Moroccan woman named Fatima al-Fihri founded a mosque in 859 that later developed into the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, which is considered to be the world's first university. However, only men were admitted to that university until 1940. The Aztecs educated all their youth at home until age 15, when all children, regardless of gender or social class, went to school. However, at school, boys were taught writing, astronomy, statesmanship, and theology, while girls were taught homemaking and religion. In Europe, during the early Middle Ages, the monasteries of the Roman Catholic Church were the centers of education and literacy, the primary purpose of which was to train the all-male clergy. So now I want to ask you, how different would your schooling have been if you had been born in a different time or place? If you are a man with high social standing, probably not that different, no matter when or where you were born. If you're a man from a humble background, or if you're a woman from any background, your experience and the trajectory of your life would have been vastly different. Today, we're going to talk about school and specifically the philosophy behind different types of schooling. And here to speak with us is an expert on the topic, founder of Newlane University, Ben Blair. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Amy. I'm super pleased to be here.
We did the same thing on my episode too. We both were like, oh, I don't know what else to say. It's so great to have you here today. I'm so excited for you to talk about school with us. As usual on the episode, I'll just read your professional bio first, and then I'll ask you some more personal questions about yourself.
Okay.
Ben Blair is a co-founder and president of Newlane University. He holds a PhD in philosophy and education from Columbia University, and he is a co-author of The Kids Are All Right with his wife, Gabrielle Blair. So, Ben, I am a big fan of your work and a big fan of you as a person and friend of mine. And I'm wondering if we can start this conversation. And I must say, a conversation I'm really excited about exploring um, really the justness and the philosophical underpinnings of education in general, and then specific. I'm so excited to dive into this topic. But I'm wondering if you can tell listeners just a little bit more about you, where you're from, kind of the essential features of the way you grew up that brought you to be the person you are today.
Okay. I'm happy to, and thank you. I'm super. I'm kind of a fanboy of Breaking Down Patriarchy, also. So I'm really pleased to be here with you, Amy. And so I currently live in Normandy, France. We've lived here since 2019. Before that, we lived in Oakland, California. We still kind of view Oakland as home. And then I was born and raised in Provo, Utah. My father was a professor of linguistics at BYU, and my mom. What I thought of my mom as a stay-at-home mom, but she also taught ESL and she taught English at the junior high before I was born. Um, and let's see. So my father, uh, taught linguistics at BYU, and he was really passionate about teaching and learning foreign languages. So that was a big part of our family. We always had a lot of visitors from other countries that came to work on some foreign language project my father was working on, and then my mom and dad worked on these building these foreign language courses. They would record these courses, and my siblings participated in them, and also in making these like Spanish course, French course, German course, and my brother just older than me marketed these and built it into a successful company that was later acquired. But just the idea of education and meeting different cultures and this kind of passion for developing curriculum was something that was just um, part of our family culture. Um, and then after I finished my doctorate, I worked for a while at K-12 that did online schools. They would have a different virtual academy for most of the states in the US. And I first started working with the foreign language program. It was part of uh, the courses that my father and mother and siblings had contributed to. So I first started with that, and then I kind of worked on other areas, other curriculum, where I would review competitors' materials and kind of look out on what's just around the corner in online education. And so I spent about 7 years kind of deeply immersed in online education and what people were doing. And this was just when online education was starting to take a hold, long before COVID, when everyone was doing education online. Uh, so I did that for a while, and then Newlane started. It really started in when I was in graduate school. My co-founder was in graduate school. He was studying instructional design, and it really was more a passion project about curriculum development. It was all this excitement of, hey, there are these massive open online courses that MIT and Yale and Stanford are putting out, and there are these open educational resources that people make to share and distribute widely, and YouTube had just started and there were all these videos, and it just felt like this world of education was opening up, and it was like it suddenly feels like everything is open, everything is possible, we can learn anything. And my co-founder and I, we were really super excited about this, and he had developed the basic bones of what would eventually become the Newlane platform. And it was basically just, here's a platform for developing curriculum that can incorporate resources from the internet, no matter what the resources are. And we really thought, this is going to be, some company's going to do this, and we're really excited about it, and we want to jump in whatever company's doing that, we want to be part of that. And we would go to conferences and we'd talk with people, and we're always on the lookout for like, who's going to do it. And this is a longer answer than you were looking for, sorry, but
It's great. No, keep going. It's great.
so and we started doing other work. Like I did this video series with our family, and my co-founder was like the lead technologist at a state university. And we kept thinking, why hasn't anyone done this? And then we were kind of at a place where we said, hey, let's just try this out. No one's done it. Let's just go for it. And so we kind of struck out. We had this basic platform that he had built, and we started to just put courses on it and talk through like, well, what features do we need? What are kind of the essential features? We don't want this to be a big bloated platform. And because of our experience, we had a good idea of the things that we wanted and didn't want. And then we launched. So it wasn't, we didn't start out like your introduction is super compelling, and we've kind of arrived at what's wrong with education, but we kind of arrived that exclusivity is this big looming monster in education. We didn't start out thinking, let's go tackle that. We started out, we're really excited about developing curriculum. And there are
Mm,
all these amazing resources, and the library of available resources is just continuing to expand.
mm.
So we were really excited about that. And then as we started talking with students who were interested, this idea of uh, gatekeeping and exclusivity, the education was built to exclude a lot of people. That became the new kind of passion for us. That, well, we're really excited about developing curriculum. We have a great platform for building curriculum, but the heart of this is quality education is a basic right, and it should not be withheld from anyone.
Well,
So
I kind of love, I mean, honestly, sometimes you have like a dreamer, a visionary that can see like this is wrong with the world and we need it to be this way and we want it to be more just. And sometimes the problem is like that's a really great idea, but if you don't have the training to know how to create that change and to do it practically, like in concrete details, then sometimes the change never happens because the idea can't take off. It doesn't have legs under it. And so I think it's really neat, actually, that you're qualified. You have all this experience from the time you're little. It sounds like your parents are both educators, and then you're educated at Columbia, and you've done all this stuff. So you've got like, I know how to do this, and it sounds like, and then afterwards it was like, oh my gosh, and this will make an amazing difference in the world to make the world a more equitable place. Is that right? Like, so you've got both pieces, which is really great.
yeah, I mean, and I'm still very excited and enthusiastic about developing curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's something that just feels like a genetic inheritance, that I get excited about it in ways that other people don't.
I love it.
But then the reward of now having graduates from Newlane and
Mm.
seeing their lives change is much more motivating and much more rewarding. So and seeing how that could expand and address more people, and this is what we want to do. We want to make education available and accessible. Our mission is to make quality online liberal arts higher education accessible to everyone on earth by breaking down the barriers of cost, schedule, and geography.
Mm.
So we tried to build that into the basic DNA of what we're trying to do. And then as we've seen it, that kind of be realized, it's been super, super rewarding.
Mm. That's amazing. Well, I mean, I started the episode, like the introduction, kind of as broad as you possibly could, right? Going back to the very beginning of what we know about education. But I just do want to spend like literally 1 minute kind of really putting a fine point on that. Like, what are the problems that we've seen in education throughout history and through today? What are the inequities that we see?
Um, I mean, I would say, I don't know that I'm an authority on all the inequities in education, but I would say this looming monster of exclusivity, and I think your introduction really painted a compelling picture of that, is that education has been reserved for a certain group of people and everyone else is excluded.
Mm.
And I think there's been tremendous value for those certain people who got this education. Like, they had this richer life in some ways than other people. I do feel like education is one of the most valuable heritages of the human experience, that not only have we developed a lot of knowledge and learned how to do a lot of things, but we've passed that on, and we can pass that on, and other people can learn and master these things and experience a more enriched life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say we've definitely made strides. Women can now go to college. Uh, People from different races can go to college. It's not as exclusive as it has been, but it's really taken a long time to get there. Breaking down these barriers of access to this information did not translate into now everyone gets this education. And part of what we wanted to do is we're too small and young to really tackle this, but to contribute to expanding this and making quality education available and accessible to more and more people.
Hmm. Amazing. Well, let's find out how you're doing that. And I'd love to frame the conversation around your manifesto, the Newlane manifesto. So maybe what I'll do is just maybe read you a phrase from your own manifesto and then have you expound on it a little bit and talk about how this idea is shifting and bringing more equity to education throughout the world. So the first one I want to talk about is this. It says, education should be available and accessible to every person on earth. And then it says, making quality education inaccessible or exclusive is immoral. Education belongs in the same category as shelter, clean water, and basic food. That's a bold claim. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to write a manifesto that was aspirational,
Hmm.
but also meaningful and something that we could really take practical steps toward. And we wanted to take make a firm stand. So I think casting this as a moral issue was important for us. That it's not just quality education is really valuable, but access to quality education is a basic right. And it's immoral to deny people that. And we've had reasons, we've had not reasons, we've had excuses to block people from that. But our work should be to remove barriers to so more and more people, so everyone can access this. And I do think, I think I mentioned earlier that a quality education is among the most valuable heritages of humanity. And and denying some people that because of where they live or when they're available or what they can afford is is something with moral implications. So we want to be on the side of opening up access, of making it available to more and more people.
So
And
let's dig. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry, and I think just putting it in the context of those other rights, that we could say, well, people deserve shelter if they can afford it,
Yeah.
and if they live in the right place, and if their schedule allows, or to do the same with clean water and basic food. We would retract with um, horror at that. And we haven't treated education like that, but it doesn't take it's not a very far jump to see that access to quality education has similar implications as access to those.
Can I share one little story from my own life, my own experience?
I love it.
Um, I went to Cambodia a few years ago, and I was talking with one of the tour guides who was there, and he was saying, "Oh, Cambodia is like we love women here in Cambodia. It's like a matriarchy. And we have goddesses, and the husbands are always like, "Oh, honey, whatever you want in the household." And I thought, that's lovely, sure. Like I'm not going to doubt, and I think it's cool that you pray to goddesses. But we went to a school, and like an elementary school, and we were, you know, learning from them, playing games with the kids, and I talked to the principal of the school in rural Cambodia, and it went up to 5th grade, so like age 11. And I said, I had been playing games with the kids for quite a while, and kind of there were a few that I thought were just so cute, and the kids were doing something else, and I was looking out over them, and I said, "So how many of these kids will go on to like high school?" And he said, well, yeah, a lot, like almost all of them will go on to high school. I think that he said to like age 16. And because I had already started studying gender, I said, all of them? And he said, oh, well, all of the boys. And it turned out the girls, this was their last year of school, was at age 11, because they were needed at home, taking care of children, taking care of the household, working on the farm, doing that work. And so to your point of like looking at it as a right, a human right for all people, that can be kind of like a philosophical thing that lives in your head. When you look at the actual faces of children and looking like, at that table of those kids eating together, that one will get to go to school, and you can just tell where that's going to take his life. That one, this is her last year. She'll be 12 next year. That's her last year. And picturing actually what her real life will look like without education. All else being equal, they live in the same place, they have the same families, they have the same communities. The only difference is gender, and gender just determines schooling. And it was really hard. Like, all you have to do is look at a child to realize, like, yep, food, air, clean water, shelter, access to education will determine everything for that person's future. So I'm with you. You just look at a kid, and you
Mm.
will be converted to that way of thinking. Okay, can we move on to the next one, or did you have something that you wanted to say?
No, that I'm happy to.
Okay. So your next point in the manifesto says education should be disconnected from geography. Students should be able to learn anything from anywhere on earth. With few exceptions, tying education to geography is a form of exclusion. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is another aspirational tenet of the manifesto, but it's also something that we return to regularly to kind of see how can we reach more people. Um, Geography has been an enormous barrier. I mean, we might think in the United States, well, yeah, if you live in these neighborhoods or these states, and you might not have access to this and this, but if you think on the in the global scale, like you mentioned in Cambodia, then the uh, kind of the scale gets huge. And I mean, we have a couple students who, one of our earlier students, she's this mother from Zambia, and she had tried to find a university, and she found one and worked with them for a while, and then ran into issues because of her schedule. I guess that's more schedule than geography. Um, but she didn't have a place in her town where she could get a quality education. There were no options, and her life was kind of blocked at that point. She didn't there weren't really routes outside from where she was, but with an education that she could access just with access to the internet, it would change her whole it would change her possibilities, it would change her whole outlook, it would change her whole status in her community in profound ways that I can't imagine. So this other student, he lives in Egypt, and he studied, he got a degree at a local college, but he wanted to study philosophy. And he learned about Newlane and started studying and really excelled, like really wrote papers and um, would perform on assessments, was really exceptional. And I just had this realization of like, had this person been raised in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Palo Alto, he could have just been this all-star, the whole world is bending over to help him. And what he can do and what this opportunity gives him is not only an opportunity for him to excel in something that he loves, but but with that, this self-conception of like who he is and what his potential is for the rest of his life, and the future he can imagine now that he couldn't ever imagine. Like, and I don't use that term loosely. Like, he could not imagine the sorts of things that can be in his future now. And it really was fundamentally a question of geography. Like, you were born in this place, so your future has these options, and that's it.
Wow, that's really powerful. And I'm so happy that you're sharing like actual examples of people that you know that you've been able to help. So keep those coming. You mentioned, I think geography and schedule probably overlap a lot of the time, right? So I wanted to read the sentence about schedule too. You say education should be disconnected from a schedule. The most effective time to learn something is when the student is ready, not when the teacher or institution is available. I never thought about that. And you mentioned it a little bit before, but one thing that I thought as I was reading through it is it seems like a typical university schedule where like the teacher and the institution has decided the classes that we offer are these at these times, and I'm guessing that that excludes, or at least it makes it very hard for students who need to work, which would perpetuate classist systems, right? Like the students who are coming from modest or backgrounds who are like they're not having anybody pay for their university education, they have to work, and then it just compounds, like the difficulties compound for them and then perpetuates this, they can't get ahead. Am I reading that right? That
Yes.
schedule is a bigger deal than I thought, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And in fact, like, we our first foot out in marketing is that we have this reasonable tuition cost. And it's been really amazing to hear again and again from students that this schedule piece is if not as important, if not more important than the cost, the affordability of a degree. And if there's a profile, the most prominent profile of our students, and this gets to, I think, uh, what you talked about in the introduction and the whole idea of breaking down patriarchy. If there's a profile, a prominent profile of a Newlane student, it's a mother who completed some college, and then because she started a family or needed to take on work obligations or needed to care for a family member, stopped her college education, often would work to put her husband through school, and her husband not just through a bachelor's degree but through an advanced degree, and never finished college, never imagined that they wouldn't finish college, never thought like, yeah, I don't care about education. But because they because primarily because the schedule wouldn't work. they couldn't fit school into their schedule. And because of that, they didn't ever complete a bachelor's degree. And the future that they had kind of promised themselves was just blocked at that point. Not to say that everyone needs to get a bachelor's degree and everyone needs to get an advanced degree, but so many of our students had thought, my life is going to be, of course, I'm going to get a bachelor's degree. I'd like to get an advanced degree. Education is very important to me, and those visions, those anticipations, were cut off just because they couldn't meet with the rigid school schedule. So that's a primary, the central profile. And then another piece that I come back to often is at school just how uh, kind of I don't know what the word for it is. Help me with the word. It's like it's flippant. How flippant a school can be with saying something like, I'm sorry, this course isn't available till next fall. So
Mm.
you're not going to be able to complete your degree for another year.
Mm-hmm.
So just put your life on hold for 1 year while we wait for this course to be offered again in the fall. So this flippant attitude of institutions, because they hold all the power, all the control of like, hey, we make the calls, this is what you signed up for.
Yep.
How they are kind of flippantly treating people's lives. These are people's lives that are held up for a year. And just think, like, I every time I come back to this, I'm just like astounded at how casual and flippant universities can be with people's lives like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes a real difference for them. It's nothing to the institution and it's everything to that individual student. Yeah, that's really amazing. Okay, let's move on to the next kind of tenet of this manifesto. It says education shouldn't be admission or permission based, but freely available upon the asking. That's radical. That's really radical. Do you want to read the next sentence, Ben? Are you looking at the document so you
Yeah,
can
I can
just
see it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect. Do you want to just read the next part and then talk
sure.
about it?
The current admission-based system is a vestige of a scarcity model that could only fit a limited number of seats in a classroom. No one should have to be admitted or ask permission to learn a subject. And this was one of the tenets that it took me a little while to wrap my head
Mm,
and really be converted to this one. Like, I was kind of hesitant on this,
mhm,
just thinking like, well, come on, not anyone can just go to medical school. And the more we talked about it, it like the constraints and the barriers to education make it so that, yeah, only certain people go to medical school, and often it's because they know it's going to be an economically rewarding career, and or that's what their mother did, or their aunt or their uncle or whatever. And if we treat it not like we have treated it before, but if we just said, hey, anyone who wants to do this can do this, then the people who are really interested, who want to do it for the good in itself of medical education or whatever, that it could attract these people, instead of being like, we've just narrowly confined and defined who can go to these places. And by doing that, we've excluded many people who could be amazing candidates. And I think of the example I gave of this student in Egypt, who is this amazing student who never would have thought, never could have imagined um, doing this sort of program. And I just imagine, there's that quote about Einstein's brain. I forget who it was that they said something like, I'm not as impressed about Einstein's brain, but just knowing how many other equally as capable brains just go on unnoticed, and
Mm,
because we don't have a way to kind of recognize and enable all these
mhm.
other people who are blocked off.
Yeah. Can you even imagine, the grief of that, actually imagining all of the human potential that was not able to flower because there was nothing to foster it throughout the ages. That's tragic. And so I guess the way to take that grief and just channel it forward toward the future of like, let's do something about it, which is what you're doing. So some of the like subpoints of this is you also say in the manifesto that education shouldn't have a prescribed completion time, and it shouldn't be set to a specific time period in a person's life. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because these are all like, whoa, like they just challenge kind of preconceived notions that I didn't even realize I had just because it was based on what I've seen so far in my life.
Yeah. And I apologize. Like, the manifesto isn't I mean, I think it's an inspiring document, but it's kind of a weighty, a heavy, not like a fun.
Oh, I love it. I
I
think
mean,
it's so inspiring. It's wonderful.
okay, but I guess I'm saying we're not laughing a lot, which is
Yeah.
would probably make a funner podcast episode. But anyway,
No, this is exactly what it should be. It's fantastic.
yeah. So education should not have a prescribed completion time. Like, so this student in Zambia that I mentioned earlier, she had worked with this other university, and she's an amazing student. Like, she would thrive at any school. And this school that she went to, she had to withdraw because the assignments were due at midnight on a certain date, and she wasn't able to finish the assignment then. And there wasn't flexibility, and there was so and then she found us, and we're like, yeah, we'll work with you, we'll be flexible. If you don't master it right now, that's fine, you can master it later. Like, what's important is mastering the content for the course or the degree or whatever. It's not mastering the content within this really rigid time frame. And then another example I have is talking with a Newlane professor, and I'll just talk a little bit about how, because it's important for how what this professor said. So the way a student passes a course at Newlane is, the final step is they meet with the professor in a one-on-one video conference like this, and it's called a course hearing. And the professor has all the goals and objectives from the course, and their role is to verify that the student has mastered all the goals and objectives or not yet. And at the end of that conversation, it's 30-40 minute conversation. At the end of that course hearing, the professor either says, hey, I'm satisfied you've mastered all the goals and objectives, I'm happy to approve you for passing this course. Or they say, hey, I'm not yet satisfied you've mastered all the goals and objectives, go back and review the lesson on photosynthesis, and we'll schedule a follow-up hearing. And I told this to one of our professors, and he said, oh my goodness, that would have just changed everything for me and my students. There are so many students that I feel like I have to give them a C, but I know if I had another week, they'd be fine.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's not, so first, what is really important is, have they mastered the content or not? That's what's important. If we then tie it into, have they mastered the necessary objectives and goals before this date, then, like, what are we doing? And what happens is we end up punishing students for not very good reasons at all.
Yeah, and then I remember the TED talk by Saul Kahn, who founded Khan Academy,
Yeah.
and he talks about like holes in the foundation of your house. And if you just have to move on and keep building like the second floor on top of a first floor that isn't solid, the house is going to fall at some point too. So the quality of the education is diminished by moving on before the student's ready anyway. So I just feel like that's not good for anybody. Yeah, that's just incredibly it's again, it's just like, duh, why hasn't it always been like this? And I guess it's true that it is hard if you have a classroom of 30 kids and they're all moving at different rates. Maybe you have somebody who gets photosynthesis after 5 minutes and somebody else needs a longer time. So I get why sometimes that's not possible to to individualize instruction, but I think it's awesome, and that's one of the benefits of the structure that you use at Newlane.
And I think, just to your point, like, our educational system in a lot of ways is built to say, let's reward and celebrate the kids who learned
Yeah.
photosynthesis in 5 minutes,
Yep.
and let's punish the kids who don't learn photosynthesis, who learn photosynthesis, but
Yeah.
it takes them, a few weeks longer, and so
Yep.
they're going to get punished for that. Like, it's a ridiculous scenario when you think of it like that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's how most institutions are kind of set up.
Yep. 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 Okay, next one. And this has several subpoints that I'd love you to go into, Ben. The next one that I selected from the manifesto is education should not be competitive or judged by other students' achievements. And that kind of goes along with what we were just saying of the different students in a classroom. But can you talk about some of the factors and the features of this statement?
I mean, just the our most recent conversation, that our education system is built to celebrate the people who master the stuff in a shorter time frame than others. And then the question isn't mastery, but the question is timed mastery. And like, I'm not sure how valuable that is. So we've how this plays out is, I mean, I talked about what a course hearing looks like. So it's really an individual assessment. It's competency based education. That's a term that maybe you and your listeners are familiar with. The idea is that what matters is that someone has mastered the material, not how long they've spent in the class, how much they participated in the class, whether they turned in all the assignments. It's just, have they mastered it or not? Or have they mastered it or not yet? And what we've tried to do is lower the stakes to, and I feel like in a lot of what we've done, we've tried to push back against a lot of the culture in higher education, where often professors are set up as an adversary, as someone who's like, I need to sort these students uh, in some sort of arrangement, and what we've tried to do is just make the professor's role really straightforward. Like, you just assess whether they've mastered these objectives or not yet, and give them guidance if they haven't, and that's it. You're not an adversary. You're not a judge. You're not a judge on the student. You're a judge on their mastery of this material. And we want to be really rigorous in that and make sure that our records of what the students have mastered are meaningful and informative. Um, so let's see.
I
Well,
think that's Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think what you said before, that it's a truism that it takes some people longer to learn things than others.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean they should be punished for that, or that their mastery should somehow be viewed less than the mastery of someone who learned it faster.
Mhm. Yeah, and one thing that I thought of too when I read this was just that the fact that you've articulated it in the manifesto that it's not a competitive environment and you shouldn't be judged in comparison to other students. It made me think of I've done a lot of volunteering with first gen college applicants and then like mentoring them through college. And I know that I've known a few students who come from a background of like low income. Their parents are immigrants. Their parents haven't been to college, sometimes not even to high school. They get into a really great college and so proud and they're totally capable. But
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome can be terrible. And like that feeling that they already have inside of them of, I don't belong here, or they're just not sure that they measure up just because of their life experience. And so if the environment there at college is at all comparative and competitive, which they usually are,
Hmm.
it students can drop out of college because of that. Not that they're not academically capable, but because they just feel like I can't compete, I don't belong. And so it was really heartwarming to me to read that the education should not be competitive or judged against each other. There's just no reason for it. So I really thought that was powerful as well. Okay, I've got one more, I guess. Does that sound okay? And
Yeah.
then we'll go to the last one. Okay. So the last one I wanted to ask about is education should not have a prescribed way of teaching. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah. And maybe, sorry, I don't mean to get into too many details about Newlane, but just to kind of give a context for how this works now and how we imagine it
Hmm.
working in the future. So at Newlane, a degree is made up of courses. Courses are made up of lessons. Lessons are made up of objectives. And that's what we name, that's our nomenclature for all those. And then objectives, an objective is a specific intended learning outcome. So, an example of an objective might be explain the process of photosynthesis or retell Plato's allegory of the cave. It's this
Hmm.
very specific, granular, measurable objective. And and for each objective, what we've done is we've curated instructional resources. We've either created instructional resources or we've curated them. So it might be like, well, here's a video that explains photosynthesis, or here's a podcast that talks about um, the allegory of the cave, or here is an interactive website that shows how photosynthesis works. Um, so each objective has different instructional resources and often different types of instructional resources, like a video and a written text or a podcast episode. And then and then the standard is the objective. So we don't really care how you learn to explain the process of photosynthesis as long as you can explain the process of photosynthesis. It doesn't matter if you learn it by reading a book, talking with your aunt, talking with a friend, watching a video. It doesn't matter. What we're after is, can you explain the process of photosynthesis? And then we work to rigorously verify that, yes, this student can explain the process of photosynthesis. And then so that's how we work now. And in the future, we would love for this to be an even more open place where it's like, we would love for a lot of people to compete for what are better and better ways to explain the process of photosynthesis, or better and better ways to explain the effects of patriarchy, or
Hmm.
whatever it may be. Um, that uh, we think, you can imagine there's some random high school teacher in Panguitch, Utah, who actually can explain photosynthesis better than anyone at Harvard, but they're not given any forum to
I
do that.
love
But
it.
if there is if there could be a forum that person could be rewarded for that, because that's a really valuable uh, skill.
Wow, that's so cool. That's amazing. Well, that makes me want to read. There's one thing under this heading where you write prevalent teaching approaches are often culturally, gender, or socioeconomically biased. While clear and explicit learning objectives can be universally agreed upon, the manner in which these are achieved should be as diverse as the student body. So that's what I'm hearing you explain is like different people have different ways of learning, and there can be different sources of that learning, and it doesn't matter how, it just matters that they learn it. Um, and I guess I wanted to bring that up too, because unfortunately, we're to the end of our hour, and I wanted to end on that too. And because this is a really concise articulation of a way that you are breaking down these unjust social barriers, right? And acknowledging that prevalent teaching approaches are often biased on in gender and socioeconomic factors and cultures. And so you really are doing this work of dismantling these structures. And so I guess my last question for you is to answer that. What are the specific ways that you see Newlane breaking down patriarchy and other unjust social systems?
I mean, I talked about the basic profile, or a prominent profile, which is a mother who has some college but never completed a degree, and
Yeah.
they've been blocked from completing their degree because of the cost. Like, it didn't make sense to spend $30,000 to complete their degree.
Yeah.
Their schedule, it never worked for their schedule to be able to commit to a rigid university schedule, and geography. They didn't live in a place where they could access this. So the internet and wide accessibility of the internet has been just a huge part in breaking down a lot of those barriers. And then what we've tried to do is just break down those, focusing on those three barriers. Like, okay, the cost, let's make a tuition that is affordable for anyone. And then a schedule, let's make a schedule, or let's allow flexibility in the schedule, so students, if they don't master the content within a really rigid framework, that's okay, as long as they can master the framework. And then geography, that's if they can have access to the internet, they can they can master all of the objectives at any time, as long as they have access to the internet. um, and we have seen, and this has been super rewarding, to see students, to see this specific profile, a mother who completed some college but didn't complete a degree. Now she's completed her degree, and so I'm thinking of a particular student who completed a degree in philosophy and is now in a master's degree in philosophy at San Francisco State University. And first, there's just that she feels confident and feels like, yeah, I can do a master's degree in philosophy, which is something she couldn't have imagined before, um, and now can imagine that. And also just her view of herself and what her options and what the horizons for her are. Um, so that has been, I'm thinking of this particular student, but it's also it's this profile that comes again and again of like, they have thought that this door was permanently closed, and it's no longer closed. Um, so in terms of breaking down patriarchy, if it's opening doors that have been closed to certain populations, it's been really, really rewarding to help open some of those doors.
That's incredible, Ben. And I think because we've talked and you've listened to the podcast too, so listeners will know this, but me going back to graduate school, it it really did change my life. It really did. And way after the fact, after I had already, gone to get my master's degree, and I read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. I think it was toward the end of the book where she is addressing, and this is in, the early 60s. And women say, like, once I start to wake up and see, like, whoa, 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 I've been stunted. I've been sidetracked, and I, I got off the, I got off the freeway that was taking me toward my potential. And now I'm on this kind of dead end. What do I do? And Betty Friedan said, go back to school. That is the thing that will get you back on the freeway. Then you'll have all these paths open up to you from there. And that was validating too, because I was like, that's what I did. And that really is what had the impact. So for you to make that available to women, as you're describing, it's unbelievably helpful. And that does dismantle patriarchy. And then, like you said, like then that woman shows up in all of the areas of her life differently, empowered and with confidence and with critical thinking skills and all the things that we get from education. So, and yes, and I just want to again just kind of sing the praises of this initiative, because it's breaking down patriarchy and classism, as we talked about. In some ways, like those geographic boundaries reinforce racism and all of the different things that keep the human family from reaching their potential. So I'm just so inspired by your work, Ben. And maybe the last question I'll ask is just, where can we find out more about Newlane University, and how can we support this incredibly important work?
You can find us at newlane.edu. And then as you were talking about your experience, I'm just all over again feeling like, oh, what a loss this world would have been had you not gone back to school. And just look at this amazing uh, world you've opened up, and that it can track back to going back to school makes me feel all the more confident about the work we're doing.
Mm. Well, thank you for that. And high five to you for both of us for for thank you for your work. I'm truly, truly, I find it so beautiful and uplifting, and highly encourage listeners to check it out. So Ben Blair of Newlane University, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Amy.